Hello and welcome to Help Me I'm Poor, the money podcast that's more come the fuck on, Bridget, than corporation tax. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ellie, and each week we discuss how money shows up in some of our favourite pop culture, from the classic to nostalgic and the contemporary. If you enjoy the podcast, then we are still very new, we're baby podcasters, so please rate, review and share with your friends. You can follow us along at Help Me I'm Poorcast and drop into our DMs to let us know all of your feedback and any episodes of TV shows, films, books you'd love us to cover.
So for today's episode, we are looking at the one, the only Bridget Jones Diary, the original film. There'll be some references to the book as well. And can I just say, before we get into it, how much I loved my rewatch of this. Misogyny and very casual attitudes towards sexual harassment in the workplace. Pushed to one side. It is so romantic. The characters are so charming. It's really funny. And the soundtrack is just absolutely chef's kiss. Like, I was fully immersed in Bridget Jones's world again. And I think I haven't seen it since I was so much younger, and I sort of identify with her, but also crucially, as we're going to talk about, sort of am a bit like WTF about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, it's a film about a woman and a book about a woman in her 30s who she's like, the premise is that she's sort of a disaster and she's a mess.
Is she really?
Exactly.
This is the thing. I think I now, again, when I watch Bridget Jones and look at her through the lens of like 32-year-old me, it's very different to, I guess, what I thought back when I watched it when I was in my teens and even in my 20s. And I think we can explore that as we go through, but I think it's so interesting how, I guess, society has changed, but also how, as we get older, our perception of what life looks like at different ages changes.
Definitely. And so, I mean, if you have somehow managed to avoid Bridget Jones for this whole like time, sort of, it was 2001, so it's been nearly 25 years since the film came out. The book was 1995 or 1996, I think. And so the whole thing is really set in like 90s world. And we were children at this point, but I think 90s nostalgia is so massive at the moment. It's like very much we're all trying to retreat to simpler times, and we just can't, because you can't like unspill all the beans that have been spilled. But the plot follows Bridget, who is 32. She is single. And she kind of vows to change her life after she overhears Mark Darcy being very rude about her at her mum's turkey curry buffet while he's wearing a reindeer jumper. And
it's just such an iconic scene, like, just it's just etched in my mind. Like, it's so funny still.
I know. And but also like the hurt on her face, and how well she covers it up when she hears someone giving this really scathing summary of her in a way that I just don't think that we think that way about 32-year-olds who don't have it all figured out now, which is a good thing. But yeah, so we follow Bridget as she kind of vows to make a change, to like find a man. And it's funny because it's, you know, she makes the promise and then she immediately falls back into all of her old habits. She strikes up a relationship with her boss, Daniel Cleaver, who sort of immediately cheats on her. And then we follow her kind of through this like love story, but also this like journey of sort of accepting herself. And one of the big themes throughout it is that this is a man who likes her just as she is. And so I think there is loads to discuss here. The movie doesn't sort of overtly go into money, but actually the book sort of does. So alongside all of these statistics that are thrown out, like in her diary, where she's kind of obsessing over her weight and stuff like that. There are also mentions of like she's got something like £400 in her current account. Her overdraft limit is £1,400, and she's got like just under £1,000 worth of credit card debt, which is like would have been more in the 90s, I suppose. So I think there's this, it's slightly more overt in the book, but you can see how it translates to the film. If she's not like, you know, she's not like buried under a mountain of debt, she's not in financial difficulty, but she is sort of paycheck to paycheck. She's kind of like spending a lot of her money on all of these different things to fix herself. And I think there's such a massive cost to like self-improvement that we still see now, and especially when it comes to like beauty culture, diet culture, there's so much to go into.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to start, really, because when we see Bridget, and even when you just think about it, when you mention Bridget Jones' Diary, then I think the first image that comes up for so many of us is this idea of Bridget as a mess, because that is how she is depicted. And I think one of the things that's quite striking when we talk about it now is actually looking at life through our lens as a 32 and 35-year-old, what is it about her that we consider to be a mess? Because actually, she's got quite a lot going for her.
Yeah. And I mean, again, we don't like see it explicitly stated that she owns her flat, but it feels like an owned flat. And even if she doesn't, she's paying like rent alone in central London.
She's living on her own in Borough Market.
I know. We're recording sort of in Bridget Jones territory, and I can tell you that I would not be able to afford one of the flats around here.
You couldn't afford a flat share around here nowadays. So, I mean, obviously, again, we're talking like 30 odd years ago, almost, since the book was written. But by today's standards, that living situation, for one, is not anything that suggests that, you know, she's behind at 32. She's doing really well to be living in a flat on her own, whether she owns it or rents it at this age. And on the career as well, like she has a job. She's holding down a job.
Yeah, she works in publishing, which is notoriously sort of like high prestige, low pay. And I would say like she's quite underappreciated in that role. Like her boss is always getting to her.
But that's not anything abnormal, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. But she seems to be sort of relatively junior still. We don't really get to see whether or not she's particularly good at her job. But then when she moves into TV, that's obviously sort of her forte. But there is a lot to be said there about the fact that she does just quit her job. She must have some sort of financial safety net, or very good at manifesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a bigger point, really. And I guess this is something that we do get hints at again when we see the members of Bridget's family. She looks like she has some level of financial comfort behind her. So as much as she might be a bit chaotic and messy in her own life, you get the impression that, you know, she's never going to be without a home to go back to, because her parents probably would open their door to her.
Yeah, and I think that's true. She seems to have quite like a close relationship with her parents, and they are obviously from like quite a comfortable middle class background. I think it's interesting when you see them sort of next to some of their friends in terms of like the Darcys in their sort of huge mansion. But she's obviously got that kind of safety net behind her, and I think it really translates to her feeling like safe and secure to make these big leaps.
Decisions. Yeah.
And so I don't know, I wonder if what do you think about that? Do you think some of us are just not able to take the leaps or be as creative as we want to be? I mean, she's like going from publishing to TV, but like TV is obviously notoriously like difficult to get on in,
and not well paid again at a junior level. And so I think 100% there is an element of, still today there are some industries where getting into them really relies on there being that level of financial privilege, because not necessarily that you've got, loads of money, but that you've got the ability to live at home or to get a bit of help with the rent, or even that ability to quit and try something else because you know that you're never going to be homeless. And I think it's a really kind of under acknowledged form of privilege. I mean, there are the overt ones, like, if her parents bought her flat, that would be much more overt. But even if it's a case that you know that you can afford to take a risk in your career because you've got a partner or a friend or family often that will put a roof over your head if it all goes tits up, like, ultimately you're in a good position, and not everybody has that. And I think we don't really kind of always acknowledge what a privilege that is. And I know it's something that I definitely have and have had, at least when I started off the business. I mean, things were very different at that point because we didn't have the right responsibilities that we have financially now. But still, like, I know that I was able to just give it a go because my partner, then now husband, could pay the bills. And he said, go for it because the opportunity's there, see what happens. And that is a huge privilege to have that.
Definitely. And I think we have seen people sort of speaking out about the lack of working class representation in publishing, in TV, in music. And I think it is because you can afford to take on the unpaid internships, the low paid jobs. You can afford to take a punt on something that might not work out. And kind of the cumulative effect of all of that stuff is that you do eventually kind of work your way up the ladder, or you got a chance of being like seen or discovered. And it's just something that's not necessarily accessible to you without that financial safety net.
I think it's one of the reasons why, if you actually look into it, a lot of successful founders are from quite wealthy backgrounds because they can afford to fail. And what we then see them become successful at often isn't their first rodeo. It's like the 5th or the 6th or the 7th, because you can just keep trying and failing, and there's money there to be able to try again until you land on that thing that works. Whereas actually, if you don't have that, then you have to really be confident that whatever you're going to do is going to work, or you're risking everything.
Yeah, it's just making me think of a really old episode of How to Fail with Elizabeth Day. She's interviewing the journalist Nasreen Malik, whose work is incredible. She's such a skilled writer, such a brilliant thinker. But she was talking about how, because she didn't come from that privilege, what she did was she worked in finance for years until she got that financial safety net so that she could pursue her passion. And so I think, there are ways around it, but sometimes they involve sort of maybe doing a job that you don't want to do for a few years until you get to that point where you can take the leap.
I think what's quite, though, depressing in a way is that, like, it feels like this conversation about how there are certain careers and sectors that you can't really access without that level of privilege behind you in case it doesn't work out, or because you need that kind of unpaid experience. I feel like we've been having that conversation for as long as I can remember, and nothing changes. And I don't know how it changes. I'm at a point where I feel a bit like, I've been hearing this for 15 plus years about industries like journalism, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. So do we just what can we do? What is ultimately actually going to change this, or is this just how it is, which is a sad thought?
I mean, I think there are quite a lot of organisations who are aiming to get like young working class people into the arts and provide them funding. I know that Josie Long does loads of work on this. And I guess we can refer to some of those organisations in the show notes. I think it's just about people being given the opportunity to be paid properly for their work as well. We've seen like the decline of pay in things like journalism, for example, you know, in the 90s, because Shazza, Bridget's friend Shazza, is a journalist played by the incredible Sally Phillips. She is obviously like sort of self-sufficient, and that's described as her role. She's quite glamorous. Like all of Bridget's friends seem to be quite sort of high flyers. Her male friend, whose name I can't remember, is like living off the royalties of his one hit song that he had in the 80s. But they're all like enjoying quite a level of privilege. They can afford to go out easily. They have this amazing social life, and like you know, her friends are quite like a big part of the story. And so, you know, we can see that like journalism used to be a job that you could do and get paid really well for, but that's not necessarily the case anymore. A lot of journalists that I know, especially if they're freelance, are like supplementing their income with things like content writing for brands, which pay quite a lot more money. But also, just like on that note, there's so much at the moment about how expensive it is to socialize, and how the cost of living crisis is like stopping people from meeting each other and stopping people from socializing and enjoying life more. And that's kind of something that made me quite sad when I was watching this, is that like the bars are like hopping. You know, the Greek restaurant in which Daniel throws Mark through the window is absolutely rammed, and it's just a London. I don't live in London, but I've seen quite a lot written about this. I've like heard it on quite a few other podcasts about how the like social scene just isn't what it used to be.
No, totally. And I mean, I'm not the best person to attest to it because I don't go out very much these days as the mother of a toddler, but I do think it is really noticeable. And I think part of it is still this like post-COVID world that we're in, and a lot of that is tied to money. But I think the other thing that is, again, so notable about Bridget, and the fact that you say, you know, she's got such a busy social life, is that she is single predominantly. That is a big theme of the film, is her singleness. And it makes me wonder actually whether, because we know that she's not really, if you actually look at it, a financial mess really. I mean, you said the numbers in terms of her situation there. It doesn't sound like she would describe, or we would describe her as like a financial mess, but we still see her as messy. And actually is a lot of that built around this singleness. And actually, when we're thinking about singleness as well, there's a huge element to that which ties into money. I mean, Bridget's actually living, again, quite a good life as somebody that is solo in terms of what she can afford, but the cost of being single now is absolutely huge.
Okay, I've got a quick question for you. When you picture somebody that invests, who do you picture?
Be honest, was it a man in a suit, a Jordan Belfort type, navy gilet on his days off maybe?
Exactly. And that's the issue that I want to talk about. Because for too long, the world of investing has felt like it's been built for people like them, not for women like us.
Which is why we're so excited that Help Me I'm Poor is partnering with eToro on their Loud Investing initiative. It's all about raising our voices and making sure that other women see that investing is for us too.
Loud Investing was born from a simple idea. If women don't see themselves in the investing space, then they're way less likely to feel like it's something that they should or can do.
Think about it. In finance films or shows, women are usually the wives, the secretaries, the girlfriends. The men are the ones making the big money moves.
And outside finance, we're often painted as the spenders, the ones who are racking up the credit card bills. Confessions of a shopaholic, anyone?
Exactly. But it's time to flip the script, because women do invest and we're good at it.
So let's talk about it. Let's be loud about it. Let's show other women from all walks of life that you don't need a finance degree or a pinstripe suit to take control of your money.
Get behind the movement. Let's make investing more visible, more inclusive, and way less navy gilet.
Thank you so much to eToro for being our partner on Help Me I'm Poor. To find out more, head to the link in the show notes and join us in raising our voices and investing loudly.
And just a quick heads up, all content on Help Me Earn Poor is for information and educational purposes only. It should not be taken as investment or financial advice, personal recommendations, or an offer of any kind. Always do your own research.
eToro is a multi-asset investment platform. The value of your investments may go up or down. With investing, your capital is at risk.
I have read quite a few articles about this, like sort of the term is the singles tax or the single tax. And it's something that a journalist called Nicola Slawson's written quite a lot about. She's just had a book published actually called Single, which is about all of the different elements of living life as a single person, but it does also include some of this like financial stuff. But the cost, the like extra cost is eye-watering. I think it's about £13,000 a year.
Wow.
Like extra that it costs to be single. And just things like if you live alone, you only get a 25% discount on your council tax, as opposed to two people. You know, you're not sharing the bills with anybody. And this is, I think, then why quite a lot of people who are single are ending up in living situations that are like not what they would prefer.
Yeah, I mean, even just looking at flats and rent, it's logically, I understand why it is so expensive, but even a 1-bedroom flat, obviously most of the time you will get two people splitting that cost. You're paying double if you're living in a 1-bedroom flat on your own, and the cost of things doesn't decline proportionally if you go from 2 to 1. So you often won't pay 50% less for one person to do something than two. Like a hotel room is another example of it. You don't get a 50% discount on the room because there's one of you. But if there are two of you, you're splitting it. So you're literally paying 50% of the overall cost. And economically, there are reasons for that, but it doesn't make it any easier for single people to actually be able to live the life that they want to live. It basically means that they need to earn far more money to have the same lifestyle as their friends that are in relationships.
Yeah, and it just does feel really, really unfair, actually. And I think sort of you're right that Bridget is living like a really good quality of life, like to a really good living standard as a single person. But then we also, when you put her in a situation with some of her couple friends, so she goes to that like awful dinner party where it's all couples, and that's like her friends Magda and Jeremy, they've got like quite a big flat with this massive table that can fit loads of people around it. So I think it's sort of more worse for single people, but I think also you can really see like the just general decline of living standards when you're comparing back then to now. And obviously, you know, we've got to view everything through the lens of this is a film, and there's quite often like unrealistic depictions of life, but I don't know how unrealistic Bridget's lifestyle is necessarily, because it's not flashy. It's just nice.
I guess, what I think a lot of us as millennials grew up imagining our 30s to look like, in all honesty. I think that I imagined in my 30s that I'd have my good job and I'd have my nice house and I'd go out to dinner a few times a week with my friends. And life in 2025 is quite different to the life that Bridget was living in the 90s at the same age that I'm at now. And, you know, there are various different reasons for that. But I think another thing that is so notable, which again, it's not so over in the film when it comes to money, but is such a big topic, is the cost of, I guess, pressure to conform physically and diet culture, because there's such a narrative of, I mean, it's just really clear that Bridget, you know, is feeling that pressure.
Yeah, and I think this is something where sort of the pendulum had swung so far away from like diet culture in the 90s, and the noughties were like terrible as well. But the pendulum had been swinging kind of away from that and more towards like body acceptance, body neutrality. And if you think about like the the financial implication of that for women could have been so positive, because the cost of trying to turn yourself into something that society sees as acceptable is so high. And I guess like this is quite a vulnerable thing for me to talk about, because it has played such a huge role in my life. But I think I have wasted definitely like in the 5-figure zone on trying to like mold myself into something that I'm not. And there's much more money that I probably would have spent at one point if I had access to it. So that, you know, things like tweakments, things like sort of weird diets that cost a fortune. I remember when I was at uni, I bought online these like seaweed wrap things, and they came and it was like a big tub of sludge. It was like 100 quid, which this is like what, 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
And it was a thing that you signed up to, so like they would keep sending it, and like every now and again. Oh, it was like a big tub of sludge and some bandages, and you basically had to like wrap yourself up in it. It was a bit like a at-home treatment. But I just remember, like, you know, if there was something that would promise me that it was going to make me smaller, I would be like, how much do you want? Like, oh, here's my wallet. Like, how much do you want? Take it from me. The like water noodles, do you remember those? They were so expensive. And it was like, you can eat, like, it feels like you're eating carbs, but you're just eating water.
Don't even. I mean, it's the same thing, like, in terms of the age for me, thinking back about like the end of university. Like, my university years were just so consumed by obsessing over what I ate, and it was like the spiralizing and like the everything being green, low carb. Like, when I look back now, it's actually insane when I see how much I restricted what I ate and convinced myself that it was because it was healthy. And it was better for me, but it was just control. I was just controlling what I was eating, and it just takes over. And I think so many of us went through that in, I guess, the 2010s, like the noughties 2010s, because it was everywhere and it was so normal.
Yeah, and the financial impact of that. I mean, there was like a premium put on things that were deemed like superfoods, weren't there? And it's such like a big part of the film, even down to the sort of like crushing delivery of, I thought you said she was thin, when Bridget has just walked in on the naked American in Daniel's bathroom. And you know, I read a really interesting piece, and going off on a bit of a tangent here. I read a really interesting thing a couple of weeks ago, which was like, you know, there's people like to say, oh, we would never call Bridget Jones, or we'd never call Martine McCutcheon's character in Love Actually chubby these days. And this person was like, yeah, people would. Like, let's stop pretending that we got better, because it's still the diet. Like, we think that things have been gradually getting better. The value of the diet industry since the 90s has only grown and grown and grown.
And have you come across the filter on TikTok recently that has been kicking off? And without going into too much detail, because I don't want people to go looking for it and to just give it even more legs, that to me is like the most obvious kind of representation recently that we are so far back where we thought we'd come from, where it's basically, I guess, making fun of people having like a normal body size.
Yeah. And I think all that is doing, all that the sort of obsessive pursuit of thinness, no matter the cost, is doing, is further like robbing people particularly women, 'cause it's so gendered, but like
Men
men as well,
yeah.
of their financial agency in some ways, because if that is seen as like the be all and end all, and also sometimes is like posed as your like route to access to certain things, especially now that everybody is kind of has to be like visible online.
Totally.
That's such a thing to reckon with, but it's sort of saying like, well, this is the price of entry for all of these different things and you just have to pay it. But I just, if I tried to add up all the money that I've spent trying to conform to like a beauty ideal, or trying to be thin, or even trying to like improve myself like mentally and functionally, it's so massive.
I think the thing as well that makes me really sad about it is that I remember what was going on in my head when I was that age, and I was 21, 22, and the obsession that what I ate was and the size that I was. And I look back at photos and like I had succeeded. I was absolutely tiny, but I was never happy with it.
No.
It was never enough. I always thought, oh, there's something else that needs to be improved, or oh, I need to maybe like lose that little bit of fat here. And it just shows you that you're never going to win this game. There is never an end to it.
No, and the thing is that as soon as you're happy with who you are, you're not very profitable for companies anymore. And I have said it in the past, the brilliant Emma at the Broke Generation, she talks about this quite a lot, is like one of the most financially empowering things that you can do is just try to like yourself more. Just like slowly, incrementally, if you need to, just try to build up a bit of resilience to that like inner critic. Try to tell yourself a bit more about the good things about yourself, whether that is your physical appearance, or whether it is, and this is creeping in so much more, your like health. Like I think we're moralizing health a bit. I think we're moralizing executive function. Like I have an ADHD diagnosis. Along with that awareness of neurodivergence has of course come this like wave of products that promise to make you more productive, promise to make your executive function better, and maybe like some of them work, but it's all like, if you buy this, you will be a better person. If you buy this, you'll look better. If you buy this, you'll function better. And I just think if you are pursuing this ideal version of you, like Bridget is for so much of this film, and like her big win, apart from like a very, very gorgeous young Colin Firth, her big win is that she's like, it's okay to be who I am. And I think, without trying to be too basic about the whole thing, you are way less profitable. You will have so much more agency over your own finances, and you will be able to control your overspending so much more if you just start to like yourself a little bit more.
I think one of the other things though, and this again is something that I think of a lot when I think about Bridget, but I can think about it in my own life as well. One of the challenges, other than society and, capitalism, which are the big challenges, is the role that I guess other family members play, and also like older family members who have grown up in a different time ultimately, because I do think particularly when it comes to things like body image and trying to just like accept yourself, there's a bit of a barrier there sometimes. And you hear it time and time again of, people going home at Christmas or to visit family and just comments about not only the body image thing, but like about singleness, about when are you going to settle down? Like, oh, when are you going to find yourself a partner? Or like, oh, have you put on a little bit of weight recently? Or like, oh, you look really good. Have you lost some weight? And I feel like that is something that is so hard to actually manage, because that is often just how an older generation have existed and have been and have thought. And we're trying to change the narrative to help ourselves a little bit, but we can't change them.
No, it's true. And also so much of it's not like intentional.
No.
And it's just like those people are sort of like a product of the time that they grew up at, or their own parents. And I think that also kind of what we're like saying there is that basically a lot of our insecurities, like, they don't come from nothing.
No.
It's like that insecurity is mirrored by like judgment in society, in your family, whatever it might be. And so you actually have to be really active, like really actively looking to like yourself. You're having to like bat off all of these different things. It's a bit like how like you in order to be like in control of your finances and not overspend, you have to be like an active participant in that.
If you're passive, then the capitalism and commercialism just comes at you.
Yeah, exactly. And you just find yourself like hemorrhaging money for all of these things that are kind of posed to you, not as like products to buy, but as solutions to problems. And I think that sort of like wish to self-improve, or wish to like be this fantasy version of yourself, is something that is really financially disempowering and hugely costly. And I think it's quite like a hidden cost almost. Like, it's sort of like people don't realize that is what their money is going to.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's because it is in so many areas of our life that it happens. And I think it's become so normal as well. And I think in a way, like the film and the book highlight this, it is just quite normal to want to try and fix yourself.
Yeah. And I think people have it to like different degrees. I certainly don't know any friends who aren't like doing at least a little bit of it. I have one friend actually who's very self-assured and who has some sort of inner peace going on. And it's true. Like, I think she probably spends like way less than we do, because
we need her secret.
Yeah, we do. She should write a self-help book.
Yeah.
Buy that.
And that is the thing. I think in a way you go through different phases, or at least I've noticed that I do, in terms of like how intense that critic is. And I think a lot of the time, for me at least, it's just to do with like how much brain space I've got. So I would actually say that since being a parent, I probably have actually done it less, because I do not have the time and the bandwidth to do it. And, you know, obviously, like we all do, I'll catch myself and I'll be like, oh gosh, you look awful, like you look tired, like you need a facial, automatically jumping to all of the products that I could buy to fix my issues. But I think I'm also a bit more like accepting of it, because I guess I maybe feel a bit more like it's warranted now than 10, 15 years ago, where I just turned up to maybe an hour or two of lectures a day. And the rest of my time, I kind of could do what I wanted. And I think at that point, I maybe felt like I have no excuse to not be the perfect version of myself. So there was maybe more pressure in some ways.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I love Bridget as like an example of this, because she is so wonderfully flawed, and I think a really good example of like good things can happen to you.
Yes.
And you can do good things. Like, when she does the interview, which granted she does get because of a man, but let's like put that to one side. When she gets the interview, she's really good at it, even though she does it in her like own way. And so like, you don't have to change everything about yourself to be like good at your job, or to show up, or to be visible, or to be loved, or whatever it might be. And I think that is not only like quite mentally freeing, it's also really financially freeing. as well.
There are a couple of things that I read that I wanted to bring up as well in terms of our little behind the scenes, because I think that Bridget Jones, given that it was set, the film at least was 24 years ago, is really interesting. We've already mentioned the flat, but I actually looked up how much estate agents reckon that the flat would have cost in 1999 when Bridget lived in it effectively. And I was actually quite surprised by the amount because, again, like we said, it's in Borough. So we're talking zone 1 here.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what this doesn't account for, and I didn't get around to putting it into like a house price inflation calculator, is quite how much house prices have inflated in 25 years. But it was actually estimated to be less than £200,000, which sounds quite a good deal, but maybe that was normal in 1999 for a zone 1 flat.
It feels like a pipe dream now. It's a big flat as well. But I think also it depends as well what like her salary would have been in publishing. And I looked this up and they reckoned kind of 18 to 20,000, which, yes, it feels like very little now. But if we take it kind of into consideration,
yeah,
it's you still are getting grad jobs or, you know, sort of more junior roles in low paid industries like publishing are still around the kind of early to mid 20s.
I was going to say
25 years later.
That's shocking, isn't it? If that is actually the difference now, because I feel like in publishing and journalism jobs now, you'd be lucky to start on more than 30 grand.
I know. And if we're taking that like proportionally, if we're looking at that, what that flat would cost these days, is about what, $500,000?
I reckon we're much more than that, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. I'd be shocked if you could get a 1-bedroom flat in Borough for £500,000.
Okay. So if we're looking at like salaries have gone up by maybe like 5 to 10k, house prices have gone up
through the roof.
Like, oh, how depressing.
I know.
We cannot end on a note that depressing.
No.
So I think that we need to talk about maybe some takeaways that we have from Bridget and her lovely life.
I know. I feel like we've actually come away from this thinking like, Bridget Jones had a pretty good setup. Like, obviously, there were things that weren't going that well for her, you know. But on the whole, I think I'd take her deal.
Yeah. So, like, our conclusion is a 90s mess equals doing very, very well in 2025. But I think for me, that the like golden takeaway from this, and I was expecting actually it to be something more around like the single tax, which is really like important to discuss and to acknowledge, but I think my overall is much more sort of warm and fuzzy than that, which is that like your self-worth and like liking yourself, respecting yourself is a really, really important tool in like your financial well-being. I think if we can stop that like continuous flow of cash out of our bank accounts in the pursuit of this sort of ideal version of ourselves and like learn to like ourselves just as we are, then that is a very good thing, like emotionally, mentally, financially.
Absolutely. I couldn't add anything to that, to be honest. So I think we will wrap it up there as we have talked all about Bridget for plenty of time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please do rate, review, subscribe, and follow us along at Help Me I'm Podcast. Let us know what you would like us to chat about, what your favourite TV shows, films, books are, and hopefully we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.